Welcome to Bigfoot Terror in the Woods, Sightings and Encounters. I'm your host, W.J. Sheehan. Hello, everybody, and thank you for taking some time out of your busy day to spend with me. I have some very exciting news today before I begin my reading. I have just launched the Bigfoot Terror in the Woods Sightings and Encounters podcast, as well as a new website, BigfootTerrorinthewoods.com. The podcast is available at iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, and Google Play. And if you're an old timer like me, you're going to need a podcast app to download and access this podcast. On our website, you can go to the store and access my books in paperback and ebook format, as well as going to our contact form, where we are asking all of our new podcast listeners to interact with us, sending us your questions, comments, and if you've had a sighting or an encounter, I'm asking you to include your phone number, and I will personally contact you in regards to what you have seen. Perhaps it will be on our podcast, and I may even include it in one of my future volumes. So we are very excited about this, and I encourage you to go download us, become a follower, and we'll take this journey together. Our plan is to put out a podcast per week as we get going, so be patient with us and come along for the ride. Today's reading is the Gore Baygall sighting. This account was told to me by Jack Turner, a former oil rigger from Texas, now living in New Mexico. Here is what Jack had to say about his encounter. Obviously, Bill, you and I are talking on the phone, so we can't see each other face to face. But if you were able to see me in 1971 and now, you wouldn't know it was the same person. In 1971, I was a full-blown Texas hippie. Yes, it's true, the Southland had its hippies also, and I was one of them. My cronies and I used to spend a fair amount of time getting all stoned out and wandering around in the Big Thicket, as it's known in Texas. At one point in time, this area was sprawling over some 3.25 million acres of southern Texas. Today, a society known as the Big Thicket National Preserve has done a gangbuster's job of protecting and preserving 15 remnants of what once was. Now, when I was there, we all knew what a booger was, and there was no doubt in our minds as to whether or not they existed. We knew they did, and that it was only a matter of time, if you were a hunter or a woodsman, before you would have enough proof for yourself. I mean, just picture it in your mind. These critters were living here when there was 3 million plus acres of raw, untainted habitat. After hundreds of years of building, farming, logging, and oil exploration, their home turf had shrunk to a little over 100,000 acres in 15 locations. And let me tell you something that you can bet on. If you spend some time down there with the good old boys, you will see one for yourself. In 1971, I and a couple of the boys went into the Neches Bottom and Jack Gore Baygall unit, as it is called, for a day of getting stoned and flipping some frisbees around in the woods. We drove in on the Timber Slough Road and started hiking up towards Sandlot Lake, following a stream that runs through that neck of the woods. We had been trucking around for about 5 hours, getting to and coming back from Sandlot, when we were getting near to Ard Lake on the return leg of our day's festivities. We were walking through an area that had a number of what we call baygalls. Now, a baygall is nothing more than a depression in the Earth's surface, which has a really dense layer of clay underneath it, which doesn't allow the water to drain. They always form under the densest areas of the thicket where the sun can't get at them. They are also known as acid bogs. Because of the acidity and all of the rotting plants in the water, they turn kind of root beer colored, and some of them stink like your old underwear. Believe it or not, there are quite a few critters that make these Baygalls their home, especially the ones located by streams or lakes. One of the nastiest critters is the water moccasin. If one of them little suckers gets a hold of you, it's kiss your ass goodbye time for sure. So we were nearing Ard Lake, coming up on an area of Baygall, when we heard what sounded like a man running in the water. We could hear it and it would stop. We would hear it again and it would stop. Over and over we stood there listening to this sound, so we decided, as was our nature, to sneak up on whoever it was and maybe give them a scare. Well, there were 6 of us stalking through the trees like jungle fighters, heading towards the sound, doing our best to remain out of sight. We were moving from tree to tree and hiding behind any bush we could find as we snuck up on this noise. As we got close to this Baygall, we were now looking out over this swamp. All of a sudden, from out behind this big-ass cypress tree, comes this huge booger stomping across the water. We all looked at each other like, my God in heaven, and then we looked back at the booger. I don't think that it was but a minute or so later when this booger slammed its foot down into the water, reached down, and pulled up a water moccasin. To me, it actually looked like the bastard bit him, and he just grabbed it and started chomping on it. Well, let me tell you, I could not believe what my eyes were seeing. A big, badass booger having a snake for dinner. We were not exactly invisible by any means. All of us were wearing brightly colored clothes and were barely in hiding. All he had to do was turn and we would be seen. He was standing there eating when one of the boys who was squatting behind a bush moved to stand up and made a crunching sound. Well, this booger snapped his torso in our direction and let out the meanest, nastiest growl your ears have ever heard. He turned and ran out of the Baygall and into the woods so fast that we almost couldn't keep our eyes on him. Now, I know, having spoken to you before we did this interview, that you want to know everything and anything that I can remember about the booger. So here goes nothing. When we saw him in the water, I would say that it was only maybe a foot or so deep, and the critter was at least 8 feet above the water. This was a very dark and shady area, which is why the Baygall is there. And all I can say is that he was dark in color, similar to the way a black bear looks. What struck me most was that I am certain this snake bit him at least once, if not 2 times, and he seemed to be unaffected by the bites. I often wondered how they could walk around in rattlesnake country and the like, through the fields and grasses, and survive with no protection. Is it possible they are immune? I don't know. I only know what my own eyes saw. When he ran away, each leap or step must have been covering 10 feet or more, because he was going so fast that I couldn't believe my eyes. He was moving through the trees like a giant halfback running downfield with the ball. A couple of the boys I was with had seen one before, and one of them had seen several, but he actually looks for them. This was my first and only sighting. The dimensions are, as you already know, beyond our imagination. The sheer thickness of its upper body, arms, and legs is incredible, and would guess its weight at being easily 1,000 pounds or better. Thank you for listening. And remember, always carry more gun than you think you're going to need.